Hello everyone, and welcome to today's presentation on pre-pack insolvency resolution process under IBC. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, Advocate Nipun Singh Viji, who is going to talk to us about the pre-pack insolvency resolution process under IBC. Mr. Singhvi is a practicing advocate having expertise in corporate, commercial, and insolvency laws. He has advised and handled insolvency cases having debt worth more than 1 lakh crores, and important cases include SR Steel, JP Infratech, Swiss Ribbons, Citrus, Checking, Jam, etc., to name a few. He has been a member of World Bank Insolvency Group on Train the Trainers jointly with IBBI and all three IPI agencies. We'll be running a live Q&A session at the end of webinar. So we'll be taking questions during presentation as well. So if you have any query questions, you may just type in the chat box. Now, I would request Mr. Singhi to take this from here and share his knowledge and experience on the subject. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rajitji, for kind words and participants. Welcome to this webinar on pre-pack insolvency. And today we are going to discuss this new, in fact, it's not more than 4 months that this has come into place, and recently only Parliament has confirmed it by way of Amendment Act. So pre-pack insolvency is going to be the new buzzword for all MSMEs who were like waiting during the COVID period when the amount of default was raised from 1 lakh to 1 crores and they could not actually go for IBC. So this is a welcome step. Obviously, we will have to see how it plans out, because last week I was hearing somebody from IBBI and they said that there is only one application which has been filed till date under pre-pack. So probably things will become more clear because banks are coming out with different policies on how they would react on pre-pack insolvency and what would be the haircuts which they would in principally approve. So today, with this background, we are going to discuss what is there new for this MSMEs, how IBC has carved out some exceptional features which was not there in the normal CIRP. So therefore, this is something which is going to impact each and every MSME in India. As such, pre-pack MSME is nothing but there is all an informal discussion amongst all the stakeholders, especially the financial creditors, who would sit together, decide, and then say that yes, we approve you in principally to go for IBC. Now, there was no such informal way of doing things which would have been formalized in normal insolvency. So when I'm using the word normal insolvency, I would refer to it as CIRP. And when I'm referring to pre-pack, I would say PIRP. So basically, CIRP is something which has been successful. And in fact, I remember when I had the opportunity of assisting the parliamentary committee when this law was referred for modification and the second version came, we were thinking that it would be a law wherein creditors would be always in possession. However, interestingly, after 5 years, now the legislature has thought that for small companies, or I would say traditional companies, unorganized corporates, this has been a carve out where the debtors are continuing to be in possession. So basically, now the faith has been imposed on the promoters that they would continue to be in possession during this PIRP. Whereas in CIRP, the first thing which by the order of NCLT was done was the powers of all the directors were suspended. So we can say the thinking was that the debtors or the promoters were not having the capability, or it was impliedly understood that they could not continue the business during CIRP. But as far as PIRP is concerned, the concept has completely changed. So now the faith and trust is with the existing promoters, and the financial creditors are coming forward to actually sacrifice whatever they think they can to revive the company. So with this background, I would try to differentiate, and I'm assuming that most of our participants would be aware about CIRP. However, I will try to differentiate as far as possible wherever it is differentiating with the existing insolvency. In case there are any queries, we will make a mid interval and take all the queries. If you are not able to understand a specific concept, you can post your queries in the chat box. So under pre-pack, there has some new definitions which have been introduced. So I would be first discussing those definitions so that the concept becomes clear. Once we understand what are the new definitions or terminologies under this pre-pack, then we will go on to how this process pans out and specific terminology, how this process can get converted into CIRP, how it can get uh, terminated without approval of a plan, and how a promoter is given a first right of refusal, which we normally use in the shareholders agreement and all, that the first right of refusal is with the promoter. So here the concept is also called base resolution plan. So these all things we are going to discuss. So let us start with the eligibility and conditions. Who all would be eligible to come under pre-pack? So broadly speaking, it would be applicable to any company registered under Companies Act. So it could be a public limited company, it could be a private limited company, but a rider. It has to be an MSME. So they have to have their registration under MSME Act. So I will discuss what are the eligibility criteria of being an MSME. But in short, it has to be a registered MSME to go forward. How the initiation of pre-pack would happen, how the informal discussion would formalize, so that we are going to discuss here. Who can move an application? So a corporate debtor can only move an application. When I say corporate debtor, it means the management of the company can move an application, though they require the approval of shareholders. So that we are going to discuss how shareholders will give their approval in the shareholders meeting. What would be the role of resolution professional? So this is going to be a tricky issue, because always the thought process under IBC was the resolution professional is not connected, not an advisor to the corporate debtor. But here somewhat he's wearing two hats. Once when the application is going to be filed, he's already aware about whether this company is eligible to go under pre-pack or not. And secondly, when the pre-pack starts, he has to rush the process, and broadly speaking, within 90 days, he has to complete the process so that this pre-pack becomes a successful pre-pack. Else, it might get terminated, and there could be some unwarranted outcomes also, like liquidation. So all those issues we are going to discuss. Vesting of corporate debtor. So this is again an interesting issue. As I told you, under CIRP, the powers of board of directors get suspended as soon as the insolvency is admitted. But here they have put a specific provision that by default the powers would be with suspended board, would be with board of directors who are not suspended. But in case it is found that this particular pre-pack has been done with an intent to defraud other stakeholders, then NCLT has the power to direct the vesting of management of corporate debtor with resolution professional. So I would say the resolution professional has a limited role during pre-pack in the day-to-day operations of the corporate debtor. In normal CIRP, they had a better way, they had a complete control. Without their signature, concurrence, nothing could be done in the company. But under pre-pack, everything continues to be done with the existing directors. However, in case there is something like defrauding the stakeholders or creditors, or with a wrongful intent it is initiated, then a specific order by NCLT can be made. Then comes plan approval, whether plan can be approved simpliciter of the promoters or can it be open to the public. So we will take both the situations when it will be getting approved by the COC, and when the COC can deny approving it and make it a public auction, I would say, or I would say it is just like calling off new expression of invitation. So that we are going to discuss, and that's really the heart of this pre-pack, how a base resolution plan gets negotiated and how there is a tick size by which the new resolution plan comes in and the promoters are given the first right to match up that price. So that is something that when I am going under insolvency, the right to buy out my company should be first with me and then to the outsider. So this is like giving preference to the promoters. Then termination of pre-pack. So this is an interesting topic because termination as such is not there in CIRP. There's no wordings called termination under CIRP. There are only two situations under CIRP. Either there is going to be a resolution plan or there is going to be a liquidation. But here under pre-pack, at any point of time, there could be a termination of pre-pack also. It could be by way of NCLT order, or it could be an unsuccessful plan which does not get approved by the COC. In both the situation, there would be termination. Liquidation of CD is something very, very interesting. In normal CIRP, liquidation of corporate debtor can be resolved by the COC, but in pre-pack, it cannot be by will of COC. It can be only in specific circumstances that liquidation of CD be ordered by NCLT. Then, very interesting feature, normal pre-pack insolvency can be converted to CIRP. So when I'm saying pre-pack, so it's a special way of insolvency whereby most of the things are done informally and with consent. Whereas when it goes to CIRP, promoters are suspended. So their powers get suspended. So there could be a possibility that under 90 days or probably maybe 120 days under pre-pack, the company fails to get an approval of plan by the COC, and therefore COC has a right to convert this pre-pack into CIRP. So there could be another, I would say, version of insolvency being followed by CIRP. So there could be pre-pack for maybe 90 days, and if that fails at any point of time, COC can by 66% take a call to take it into CIRP. And CIRP, as we all are aware, that is 180 days, then 90 days, then 60 days. So that complete process will go on. So if the promoters fail to convince the COC, it might go into the CIRP. So there are some riders when it's going to migrate to CIRP, but this is how the flow would be. Okay, I think I can take one question because I have broadly discussed what we are going to take today in the presentation. So I think Mr. Ronak is asking, is CD required to prove solvency before applying for PPIRP? So Ronak, we would answer your question after few slides, how this particular situation of insolvency will be assessed by the company itself. So your question will get answered in few slides away. Is there any other query? Okay, so this is the only query. So Ronak, we will come back to you. So the first and the new introduction is of base resolution plan. So this is the new definition, base resolution plan. So let me put it in a very simple words. What is base resolution plan? So just like when we start, there is like for auction, there is always a minimum reserve price. There is always a base price. There is always a minimum reserved price. So just like that, something of that sort is nothing but a base resolution plan. So base resolution plan is the basic price which I am going to offer to buy back my own company. When I'm saying buy back my own company, that means I am talking about the promoters who are thinking of initiating insolvency under pre-pack. So base resolution plan is the minimum amount which I am going to offer to all the stakeholders. Now, what is base resolution plan? What are the contents? We are going to discuss it. Second is preliminary information memorandum. So I hope that you all are aware what is information memorandum. It is basically a document which is nothing but just like a Bible of the corporate debtor. What are the assets? What are the liabilities? What are the litigations, provisions? Or I can compare information memorandum of a corporate debtor with the prospectus of a listed company. So whenever a company is going to get listed, they generally offer a prospectus. So it is nothing but a marketing brochure that this is what I have. Similarly, information memorandum is basically information which is required by the purchaser for the company to make a bid, to take a call, to take a informed call how to buy that company. Now, normally this information memorandum under section 29 of IBC was to be made by the resolution professional. Whenever normal CIRP would be initiated, he would make the information memorandum, collate the information from balance sheet and third party sources, and then put together all the information and make IM. But in this pre-pack, this is the duty of the promoters, the directors. Now the directors would prepare the information memorandum. So that is something, I would say, 50% of work done. So well begun is half done. So preliminary information memorandum is something which is just like a Bible of the CD given by the CD. So the work of RP gets reduced. So one is the base resolution plan. So plan is already there, how much they are going to offer. Second is information memorandum. What is the worth of this corporate debtor and what all assets, liabilities, litigation, everything necessary vis-a-vis corporate debtor is there, that is prepared and given. Why this is necessary? Because the time period is very short. We have just 90 days to complete the process. Then pre-pack insolvency commencement date. So normally we refer to insolvency commencement date when the order of NCLT comes that yes, now the company is admitted under IBC. Pre-pack insolvency commencement date would be the date of admission of application for initiating pre-pack. So technically here also, when the application gets admitted, then this pre-pack insolvency commencement date would start. So I would say it ICD. So pre-pack ICD would start once the NCLT orders so. But as far as base resolution plan is concerned, as far as preliminary information memorandum is concerned, practically putting it, corporate debtor and the RP has to be prepared for it because they are going to be aware that the company is taking a conscious call to go under pre-pack. I'll come on to the timelines after a few slides, but broadly speaking, once the approval is taken by the shareholders that yes, we want to take the company under pre-pack, the company has 90 days to file the application. So if the company is not able to file it in those 90 days, they will have to again go back to the shareholders and take an approval. So that 90 days timeline starts much before the ICD, much before the insolvency commencement date. So that is a very striking feature because normally, even under CIRP, there is a provision of section 10 where the company can suo moto file for insolvency. But in that suo moto insolvency also, there was no concept like taking a decision and filing with the NCLT within any prescribed time. But here under pre-pack, this 90 days is a time which is, I would say, an informal time given under the law where the application itself is not admitted. Then comes what would be the cost. So as we know, whenever you all are professionals, you are aware that once we tell this concept to MSME, they will first ask what would be the cost. So what would be the legally pre-pack insolvency resolution cost? So the cost includes, let's say some finance is required to run this process of 120 days. So this process would require an interim finance. So therefore the interim finance would be the part of insolvency process cost. Then fee payable to the RP. So most of our participants, I could see they are RPs also. So whatever fee we are going to get is again a part of the cost. So basically, I would say it's a secured cost because this cost has to be there and indispensable. It has to be paid by the corporate debtor. Normally, this cost was to be paid by committee of creditors, but now it has become the cost to be paid by corporate debtor. Then any cost incurred by the RP for running the company as a going concern. So company would run as a going concern during the period of 120 days. Broadly speaking, we'll come on to the timeline 90 and how the 30 days is there. But 120 days, whatever cost is incurred to run the company is a part of resolution process cost. I will come on to the moratorium, but there is a striking feature that whatever cost has to be borne by the company to run, they do not enjoy any protection under pre-pack. So normally under CIRP, what used to happen was no goods or services could have been terminated during CIRP, and the payment of those goods and services was to be paid. Now, under prepack, they are saying the disconnection would happen if the company does not pay. So, for example, let's say the company is using electricity, company is using water, company is using, let's say, internet. So, all those are essential goods and services. But under prepack, they will have to continue to pay those expenses, and they could be disconnected if the company is not paying. So there is a difference in normal CIRP and prepack, that they do not enjoy the protection vis-a-vis goods and services payment. However, they enjoy the litigation benefit, the protection from any third party suing them during prepack insolvency also. So I've come on to the moratorium, but broadly speaking, this is the running cost of the company as a going concern. Then any cost incurred at the expense of government to facilitate this process. So in a way, they are saying that when we are trying to revive the company, help the promoter, so any expense will also form part of this prepack resolution process cost. How this period would be running? So I would come on to those sections. But broadly speaking, this prepack insolvency resolution process period would be ending maybe in termination of CIRP, maybe approval of the plan, or maybe liquidation. So all these three situations would ultimately terminate the prepack insolvency resolution process period. Then, who would be the applicant? So this is nothing but section 10 of CIRP. When normal insolvency resolution process starts, it also starts by the board of director taking a call. Similarly, under prepack, the call has to be taken by board of directors, but it has to be ratified, or I would say confirmed by the shareholders by passing a special resolution in general meeting. So we will come on to those preconditions. But yes, applicant is technically called the corporate applicant. It could be filed with CEO, CFO, MD, anybody who is authorized by the board, and it has to be backed by a shareholder's approval. Then class of creditors. So we are aware that whenever there is a class of creditors, we would require that authorized representative. As we have been seeing in the real estate companies, all the home buyers cannot be called in the meeting. They all are class of financial creditors, a special class. Therefore, some authorized representative will have to be appointed. So this is class of creditors, same as we have been doing it in case of popularly the real estate company. But yes, similar case is there of a chit fund company also, where different amount of particular, let's say, token is collected from a special class. Let's say a company was running a chit fund. So 1,000 rupees collected by A group of people, 1 lakh collected by B group of people. So A, B, C, these all form class of creditors. So basically class of creditors would be these, the financial creditors. Why we are discussing class? Because they will have to get representation in the COC. Now, valuation. So here they have defined what is fair value, what is liquidation value. We have a similar valuation regime explained under CIRP also. Here they have tried to explain with some addition. So I would like to read the definition. The fair value is estimated realizable value of the assets of the CD if they are exchanged on prepack ICD. So whenever the commencement date is there, what could be the realizable value? It has to be an arm's length transaction. So basically, it has to be something which is market driven, and it should not be something which is private. So there has to be a proper marketing, and both the parties should have acted knowledgeably, prudently, and without compulsion. So I think the valuation aspect is going to be very important when fair value has to be calculated in case of prepack, because the concept behind prepack is there are few takers of this company, there are few buyers of this company, and the promoters are going under insolvency, under prepack insolvency, because they want a haircut, especially from financial creditors. Because as we go ahead, we will come to know that operational creditors would have to be paid in full. Though there are some riders, but operational creditor have to be paid in full, and there would be a haircut for financial creditors. So people also compare it with OTS, so we will discuss that issue also. But broadly speaking, fair value is something which has to be at arm's length. So I really doubt how valuers would be able to arrive at it absolutely correct, because in case of MSME, we are talking about small corporates which does not have a very big market where there are too many buyers. So this is a case where there are very less takers for the company, and it's an MSME. Therefore, it has its own, I would say, problems where there are no organized way of doing things. There is no way how big things can be. Like a company which is a listed company or maybe a big corporate will have their own departments. But in MSME, there might not be different departments. There might not be different heads. But as far as this is concerned, fair value will have to be calculated very specifically, very meticulously. Probably market data will have to be searched for. Similarly, now fair value and liquidation value will be more important because the promoter himself is going to offer a price to buy the company. So liquidation value, as we know, it is the estimated realizable value. What we are thinking that yes, if the company goes under liquidation, what would be the value? That's the liquidation value. So normally liquidation value would be less than the fair value. Now fair market value, if it was really good, then my view is COC would always like to put it in the market and get some other buyers to buy the company. So this is going to be very tricky because the valuation, in my view, should be a precondition, or I would say a preparation by the promoters and the proposed RP to take a call whether to go for pre-pack or not. Because if they think that they are not going to offer a proper fair value, probably the COC might sell it to third party. Probably the company might go to CIRP. So that's going to be a very tricky situation, and you yourself are initiating to get a haircut to buy the company back, but then the things go reverse and the company is taken by somebody else. So therefore valuation is going to be a very tricky situation, and in my view a valuation should be done beforehand by the promoters and the shareholders to take a call whether to go for pre-pack or not. Then now comes what's the eligibility. So who is eligible? Who is eligible to file for pre-pack insolvency? Now, the entity which is thinking of going under pre-pack has to be a registered MSME under Section 7 of MSME Act. So if the company is not registered, please get it registered, because now the proposed RP will also have to give it in his report that yes, the company is an eligible MSME. So that is going to be very important. In fact, recently there was an NCLAT order on the company's name was, I think, Asis Logistics Limited, wherein this issue was discussed at length. When the MSME registration has to be checked, so it has to be checked at the time of giving of resolution plan or maybe scheme of arrangement, at the time when this particular thing is made. So here, because the law itself is saying when you are going to make an application, you have to be a registered MSME. It has to be a registered MSME to trigger pre-pack insolvency. It has to go and get the MSME registration certificate. Now, I will come on to the criteria, how we can find out whether we are an MSME or not in the coming slide. Second is, our default should be in the limit which is prescribed. So as we are aware, for pre-pack, the minimum amount and the maximum amount is defined. So it's 10 lakh to 1 crore. That's the range in which a person is eligible to file for pre-pack insolvency. So it has to be an MSME. It has to have a default ranging from 10 lakh to 1 crore and unrelated financial creditors. So whoever are related party, they are not important. Unrelated financial creditors bunch, who would ultimately form the committee of creditors, will have to get 66% consent of those unrelated FC to file for pre-pack insolvency. So this is a precondition, this is a condition precedent to filing of application under pre-pack. So this is the classification. If you could see what was the classification before and what is the classification today. Previously, the classification was based on investment. You can see ranging from 25 lakh to 10 crores for manufacturing, and for service industries it was 10 lakh to 5 crore. So only two things were included: investment and manufacturing and service industry. Now the classification has been revised. What is the revised classification? It is based on investment and turnover. So investment is less than 1 crore and turnover is less than 5 crore, then the entity could be classified as micro. For small, it would be from 10 crores to less than 10 crores investment and 50 crore turnover, and maximum side 100 crore and 20 crore. So this particular category of investment is now, I would say, replaced by investment and turnover. Recently, after this is the categorization broadly, the MSME itself is a particular topic. If you really want to learn how MSME classification would be, Taxman has a very good MSME ready reckoner. I think they have just come out with it last month. So you can read that for understanding how to calculate investment turnover. Today our topic is not how to calculate it, but broadly speaking, investment and turnover will have to be taken as per the last financials, as per the last ITR. So those are detailing things you can read in the MSME ready reckoner of Taxman. However, broadly speaking, MSME registration has to be done. So we will have to have that MSME registration as per the notification. And recently they have also included the trading companies in MSME. Previously, trading companies were not included. So today, probably speaking, manufacturing service industry is also included, and trading entities are also included in MSME. So there was a big glitch, or I would say a big area of trading companies which was not included. So now traders are also included. Wholesale trade, retail trade, whatever it is, they all are included. Now, FC's approvals. So I am talking about those financial creditors whose approval is required while filing the application. So we would be requiring approval of financial creditors who are not related party. So who is a related party? See, related party under Companies Act, related party under Income Tax Act, related party under GST. Every law has its own definition of related party. But related party under IBC has been defined in the Act. And that related party definition is much exhaustive and I would say much vast. So therefore, we will have to go by the definition of IB code. What is related party? Who all are related party and they need not be. See, the related party, obviously if I am a company and I am the MD, I would be a related party. So my voting rights will never be counted even if I have given the loan to the company. Even if I am an MSME, I am a related party and I cannot be considered for consent. So consent has to be given by unrelated party having 66% in favor to go for the application. If the company's promoters are not able to convince the 66% of the unrelated financial creditors, they will not be able to take it forward. So this particular application will not be taken forward if 66% are not in consonance. So that is first important thing. Second is, if these financial creditors are not there, what to do? Then it will be have to go to operational creditors. Now in normal CIRP also the same issue is there. If there are no financial creditors, it will have to go to operational creditors. And here under pre-pack, 10 largest operational creditors and one from worker side and one from employee side. So totaling to 12 would be the COC members. So in normal situation, the object of going for pre-pack is to reduce the debt given by financial creditors. So in normal situation, it would be unrelated FCs consenting with 66% majority to take the company for pre-pack insolvency. Now, what all is required? So I have already told you that a shareholders meeting has to be called, special resolution has to be passed. Declaration has to be done that this is not to defraud anybody. So obviously that is something which is compulsory. Whenever we are also certifying any forms, returns, we always say that whatever we are doing is not wrong, not false statement, not with an intention to defraud anybody. So that's a standard thing. Special resolution is something new. Third and the most important heart of this pre-pack is base resolution plan. So basically base resolution plan is the resolution plan which is going to be the starter, or I would say the starter for initiation for pre-pack would be the base resolution plan. So suppose I have taken a loan, let's say my loan is of 50 CR and including all interest and everything, it comes around 55 CR. So if I am going to give a base resolution plan, let's say of 40 CR, whether let's say SBI is the FC, whether it would be getting approved or not, that would be at the time of giving their consent, they will check it up. I have been told that State Bank of India has already come out with a pre-pack MSME policy. So probably they are going on various things like debt service coverage ratio, what is the debt to equity ratio, what is the profitability, what is the turnover, all these ratios, they have made out some formula. But yes, broadly speaking, they will go by their policy to give you consent, because as such, the consent cannot be given without application of mind, because they will have to think whether we want to go for pre-pack or not. This is different from OTS because this is statutory backing. OTS is every bank makes its own policy and negotiates with the borrower. But here, whatever is negotiated will get the approval of NCLT. So it is under a judicial stamp. So then it is binding on everybody who is also a third party to the resolution plan. So some of the people who are not also party to the proceeding, but this plan, once approved, once okayed by NCLT, becomes binding on everybody under the sun. So that is an interesting feature of pre-pack insolvency. So any queries till now, then I can take the queries or then we can move forward. Okay. So I have not got any query. So let's move forward. This I have explained you, operational creditors. In that case, it would be 10, 1, 1, 10 who are largest OC and one worker side and one employee side representative. So as we have already seen in the real estate companies, how the insolvency takes place, what is the logic of insolvency when there is a class of financial creditors. So on number of creditors, a person is appointed and his fee is also given under the regulation. So this is the regulations which are giving the fee which has to be paid to the authorized representative by the number of creditors he is representing. So I think this is just for information of you all. What is more important is at the time of filing for pre-pack insolvency, what needs to be checked by the company as well as the promoters of the company. So one is there should not be any CIRP of the company which has happened in the last 3 years. So I would say it is more like a barring provision. So if there has been a CIRP or a pre-pack insolvency in last 3 years, then this entity would not be eligible. Why so? What's the logic behind putting this condition? In my view, the logic is if a company was under insolvency, there was a resolution plan, company had got revived, and again it is defaulting, then it should not be permitted to default again and again. If it is not able to sustain in 3 years, then let it go to some other provision, not pre-pack. So that is the logic while they are barring. Second provision of Pre-pack in 3 years, probably it cannot be applied because pre-pack has come just now. So last 3 years, pre-pack would not have been done. Another provision is if the company is under CIRP, can I take the benefit of going under this particular pre-pack? Answer is no. So if you have been under CIRP, now you are not eligible for pre-pack. If you have been under CIRP and then eventually gone under liquidation, even then you cannot initiate pre-pack insolvency. Fourth one, and the most important one, and some people say it's a non-starter also for pre-pack, is Section 29 capital A. So Section 29 capital A, as we all are aware, disqualification of the resolution applicant. So I think probably who all our participants would have working under insolvency sector would have been aware about what happened in the Essar Steel. So just a disclosure that I was also a lawyer in the Essar Steel matter, but we all are aware what happened in it. Promoters could not buy the company because of Section 29 capital A. And at the end, they were paying much more than the successful resolution applicant, to the tune of 12,000 crores more than the successful RA. And the matter went till Supreme Court, and Supreme Court also rejected, saying that once the legislature has made a provision of ineligibility, that ineligibility cannot be cured. So that is the same logic here. If a person has been declared, let's say, a willful defaulter, then he cannot buy his own company. So he cannot ride on two horses. One is being a defaulter under one law and then buying the company under other law. So basically it is to penalize or to punish those promoters who have been doing some disqualifications as mentioned under 29A. It could be a default under some law. It could be a willful defaulter under RBI law. It could be a related party of some disqualifying person. So those all things are there in 29A. We could some other day discuss 29A because this section 29A itself requires 1 hour deliberation. But in short, this 29A is an ineligibility section, or I would say disqualification section for the person who want to be buying the company. They will have to come out of the disqualification under 29A. Proposed FCs will have to, the FCs who are going to be unrelated, they will have to give the name and consent of IP who is going to take over, the insolvency professional who is going to take over, with 66% approval. So that is very important. So 66% will have to agree. They will have to agree on a particular name of insolvency professional. So insolvency professional, practically speaking, what I have seen is the bankers who are going to be ultimately the COC members, they will always want somebody coming from their own panel so that there is no dispute or the functioning goes smooth. Now here also people have raised some issues with regard to conflict of interest, with regard to IP being involved in the process much before the formal process of NCLT is done. So yes, there are some issues which may be raised regarding independence, and we have seen in the past that NCLT keeps the integrity and independence of an insolvency professional on the highest pedestal. Same is the view taken by the regulator, IBBI. Therefore, though insolvency professional may be consulted or may be helping the company before the formal application is made, but yes, he has to be enjoying the, I would say, will of the COC, enjoying the 66%. Then this law is also applicable to LLPs. So pre-pack is also applicable to LLPs. So in that case, majority of the partners will have to declare that yes, we are doing this insolvency, and the declaration is that it is not done with an intent to defraud anybody. So yes, that's a declaration, I think in P6. Then special resolution has to be passed in the meeting of shareholders, but in case of LLP, it would be by 3/4 of the partners. So these are the basic conditions for application. Now, there is a timeline. If they decide today, they have 90 days to file an application with NCLT. So that is very important that today when they are declaring something that yes, we want to go for pre-pack, then within 90 days the ticker is started. The timeline of 90 days has started, and within 90 days it has to be done and concluded. Declaration I have told you, IP who is going to be proposed will have to enjoy the will of 66%. Now, the IP who is formally not appointed by NCLT till now, but for this period of 90 days, will have to prepare a report in form P8. Vishal sir. File such report and other documents with the board as may be specified. So they have specified some documents, and broadly speaking, this report basically says it has to be an MSME, it has to have a valid registration as per the notification, the turnover and all I have told you, or Udyog registration certificate under the previous notification. So these all things have to be verified by the insolvency professional. So his duties are starting before the formal admission of application. Now, when the duty of this insolvency professional will stop, if this 90 days ticker goes away, within 90 days the company is not able to file the application, or if the application is admitted or rejected. So even if it is admitted, his duty pre-admission will stop, and now his duties under the law will start. Duties under the pre-pack insolvency, now the Amendment Act, would start, and if it is rejected, any which ways he is out of the question. So let us now come on what is the base resolution plan. So this is a plan which is provided by the corporate debtor. So when I'm saying corporate debtor, obviously company is an artificial person. So who is going to provide it? It is going to be provided by the board of directors. Here they are not suspended. Here they are normally working as a board of directors. No powers are suspended. They are discharging their duties as the company was normally doing. So when they have to make an application, the fee is 15,000. Is a form which has to be filed. It has to have one, the declaration, which is not to defraud anybody. Second, the special resolution passed by 3/4 of the shareholders in the general meeting. Approval of financial creditors who are unrelated, giving a consent to the IP with 66% voting rights. There is also a declaration, and this is a very tricky one. There is a declaration which says that there has been no avoidance transactions. So for those participants who are not aware about the avoidance transactions, there are 4 types of transactions: preferential, undervalued, fraudulent, and extortionate credit transactions. So these 4 transactions, in short, are those transactions which should not have been entered by the CD because they will cause loss to other stakeholders. So preferential basically means, in simple words, I have given preference to my related party. I have given preference to some creditors to not pay other creditors. There could be an undervalued transactions. Normally I sell a commodity for 100 rupees, but I have sold to my friend for 60 rupees. So this is causing undue loss to the corporate debtor. A transaction which has been done with an intent to defraud some creditors. So that is fraudulent transaction. Extortionate credit is like, I have taken some money on credit, and normally under credit, if the rate is, let's say, going 12%, I have taken at the rate of 36%. So this is nothing but an extortionate transaction having an exorbitant interest rate. So if such a transaction is there, then those transactions can be reversed by the NCLT. So here what they are saying, you are coming before us, so confess all the transactions. Why they are asking for confession of all these transactions by the promoter is that these transactions will then be insisted by the FCs to be reversed, and that money should be restored back to the corporate debtor. So I am not saying all those transactions may or may not be reversed by the COC, but my point of view is, if these transactions are there and if it is being identified by the promoters themselves, so they should immediately restore those transactions. because I see no point in declaring those transactions and going ahead with pre-pack. Because if you are declaring that I have done a fraudulent transactions, it would attract other penal provisions under different law. Maybe under Companies Act, maybe under Income Tax Act, various other provisions might come into play. So therefore, before going for pre-pack, I think the cleaning of books and I would say sanitization of books should be done. So the pre-pack would start by the order of NCLT. So what has to be done is corporate data should be ready with the information memorandum. So as I have already explained you, information memorandum is just like the Bible of the corporate debtor. All the claims of financial creditor, operational creditor, or other creditors should be given by the corporate debtor to the insolvency professional. Say this is the list. Because why this list is important? Because under pre-pack, the publication or the public announcement would be done, but not in the newspaper. So it would be only on the website of the CD, website of the IBBA. But then he will have to come out with clean hands, disclosing all the details of the creditors. He should not miss out any detail of creditors. If he misses out, knowing it to be there, then there are penal consequences. There could be a penalty of 1 lakh to 1 crore if he conceals something. So therefore, the list of claims has to be prepared very meticulously. And in fact, my feeling is when pre-pack will start, there has to be a cutoff date and the business would have to be stopped maybe for 15 or 30 days so that the appropriate application when it is filed, there's a cutoff date with regard to all the creditors. Because if the company continues to do the business, then the list of creditors would have to be updated on a dynamic basis, and probably court might ask for an updated list of the creditors. There has to be some cooling or calm period for this also. Then resolution professional who is appointed will actually have to monitor the management of the affairs of the company. He is going to only monitor it. He is not going to supervise each and everything on a day-to-day basis, just like he was doing under CIRP. He will have to just see that they are not doing any business, they are not doing any mismanagement, they are not doing any defraudulation transactions with any creditors, and therefore he has to only see it as a monitor and not sit down to actually execute the work. So that is very important. His work after this would be to constitute committee of creditors, find out, as we have discussed, PUF transaction. If there are any transactions, probably he will have to ask for explanation by the promoters. If he is satisfied, it is well and good. Otherwise, an application will have to be filed for avoidance transactions, and these transactions whose application is filed will continue even if the pre-pack insolvency is terminated. Even if the pre-pack insolvency is stopped, terminated, or maybe closed, even then those applications will survive. So this is very important that a person has to take a meticulous call whether to go for pre-pack or not. Because probably if you go for pre-pack and there are some transactions like this, it will again hurt. So in my view, the preparatory work should be to get a valuation done beforehand, to get a forensic audit done beforehand. Forensic audit, I mean PUF transactions audit, because normally people refer to it as forensic audit. Some people also refer to it as transaction audit. So this is the timeline. So my colleague has beautifully prepared this timeline. 2 days public announcement has to be done, but not in the newspaper, only on the websites. So this, in my view, I think it's going to be tricky, because probably some creditors might tomorrow come and say that we were not aware. So therefore, the promoters have to be very meticulous, and each and every transaction claim has to be given to RP, so that tomorrow no problem comes in because of claims. Then appointment of registered valuers. As we have already talked about valuation, liquidation value, fair value and all. So 2 valuers have to be appointed in each class, as normally is done. Land, building, plant, machinery, financial assets and securities. So all those would be done. Committee of creditors would be constituted. Again, unrelated FCs would be coming in the committee of creditors. Now, in this committee of creditors, what would happen is very important. Base resolution plan, if it is approved with 66%, nothing like that. But if the committee thinks that this plan is of a lesser value and we might get a higher value, then they might go for publication for invitation of resolution plan in public. So this is going to be an interesting part, how base resolution plan would then be competing with the other resolution plan. So this I have discussed in my upcoming slide, but broadly speaking, after this and doing all this, there would be a parallel transaction audit going on, avoidable transactions if they are found, explanation is asked, and if insolvency professional is not satisfied with the explanation, he might go ahead with filing of application of avoidance transactions, and those applications would be going on with NCLT but will not stop the movement of pre-pack. So then even if that application is pending, plan can be approved by the COC and put before NCLT for further approval by NCLT within 30 days. So this is very interesting. What they are saying is by 90 days, the application with the approval of plan will have to be filed and NCLT will have to decide within 30 days. So I doubt that putting a condition on NCLT would survive, because there have been some Supreme Court judgments which says that you cannot bound the judiciary by timelines. They will only be directory in nature for the judiciary and not mandatory. But yes, if you read the language, they have used the word shall. So probably this will again be required to be decided by the courts. So this, I think I have already taken duties of RP. I'm coming on to powers of RP. So what is the power of RP? So basically he can utilize his discretion or power to do what? To access the books of CD. Obviously he can access it. He can also access any electronic records or the documentation done with any of the government body. So he has having all the rights to do it, but he may do it or may not do it. It's up to him. If he feels there is a suspicion, he might go into investigation of any transaction which he appears that is not disclosed by the management of the corporate debtor. He will attend all the meetings of the board, and in fact I think the best practice would be that he should be invited, permanent invitation should be given to him for any of the decisions taken in any of the board meeting, so that he would be there for every decision making. All the agendas and everything should be shared with him, and he can even ask for it. Obviously he has a right, he has a power to ask for it. He can appoint accountants, professionals, lawyers, everybody he can appoint. He has the power to do all these, all the information required for finding out the avoidance transactions. He can go and find out all the transactions as we have already read it in the normal CIRP, 2 years and 1 year. For related party it is 2 years, a non-related party it is 1 year. So those provisions are absolutely mutatis mutandis applicable here also. Valuation, we all are aware that 2 valuers have to be appointed, and if there is a difference which is coming too much, a third valuer can also be appointed by the insolvency professional. I don't think here anything would be required much more on the valuation part. Information memorandum, it's absolutely the same as we do it in the CIRP. So it's a bunch of assets and liabilities which is disclosed. Financial statements, latest as well as of 2 years, are disclosed. All the related parties, guarantees given, guarantees taken, details of members having more than 1% stake in the corporate debtor, all those details are there. Tricky part would be the litigation, and my suggestion to all the insolvency professionals attending this webinar should be that all the litigations should be taken and seen that whether they have been disclosed or not, because sometimes it happens that MSME do not have a proper way, a proper litigation policy, whereby all litigation comes on the balance sheet, because as we know, every litigation does not get crystallized into provisions. Sometimes there could be an off balance sheet items like contingent liabilities. So probably they do not have a place in the balance sheet, but probably they would be having their place somewhere in notes on accounts. Sometimes we will also have to inquire with the lawyers of the corporate debtor to find out if there are any litigations, because lawyers' fee will always be paid by the company. So you might have to backtrack that whatever payments are paid to lawyers, you find out specific lawyers and ask them to confirm what is the litigation, what is the status of litigation. because litigation is something which will actually increase or decrease the valuation of the company. In fact, I was discussing this case of telecom companies. If you see Vodafone Idea, the merger was to make a big corporate in telecom industry to face insolvency, which happened with other companies. Aircel went into insolvency suo motu. Reliance Communication went by a financial creditor. So other companies were reeling under IBC, and this company merged to create a synergy. But recently, what happened was off balance sheet item, whereby the spectrum fee got confirmed by Supreme Court against these companies. So now the statement I read somewhere was that these companies, I think Vodafone's statement was that if government does not help us, we might also have to go under insolvency. So what is the reason? So probably a healthy balance sheet may not be always a healthy company. There could be a litigation, a contingent liability somewhere down the notes on accounts, which might tomorrow come and get crystallized in the balance sheet and might distort the positive, probably the net worth of the company. So I think I have tried to answer query of Ronak, who said that how do we actually understand whether the company is a solvent company or not? So insolvency normally does not only mean that if I'm not able to pay somebody, probably it might tomorrow also mean that there is a default which is going to come, and therefore I am taking a preparatory call. So if you see the triggers is 10 lakh to 1 crore of default, but probably tomorrow this 10 lakh to 1 crore default may also get increased to more than 1 crore. So if today I am thinking that there is a default and I am falling under this, go for pre-pack. So if you are going for pre-pack, probably you are saved. Otherwise, if you go under section 10, the default is more. You will have to go under section 10. Then probably you might not be the first person who could offer and the FCs would negotiate with you. Probably it will then be open for the public to come and buy the company. So it is better to go for pre-pack, because here the default amount is 10 lakh to 1 crore. But the status of MSME will always have to be seen. If you are an MSME only, then you can go for pre-pack. Because in my view, in my personal view, 10 lakh to 1 crore is only for default. So tomorrow if my default gets more, probably I may also go into CIRP. I may not go for pre-pack, because pre-pack is something which is a special chapter introduced only to help the reeling MSME. So probably MSME default may also become more, and then I may not be eligible to go under pre-pack insolvency. Is there any query with regard to this, participants? So you can post it in the chat box. I think we have 61 participants live now. Okay. So in invitation for resolution plan. So before coming on to this, I think I will take you to base resolution plan. How base resolution plan gets negotiated. I will come back to the previous slides, but first let us understand the process. The process of resolution plan is that CD, that is the corporate debtor, submits a base resolution plan. So this is the basic thing which I am proposing. So I am as a promoter going to the COC and saying, see, this is the base resolution plan. This is the money which I am going to pay you. Now, if the base resolution plan is not paying the operational creditors in full, can the COC reject it? So answer is yes. If the base resolution plan is impairing the payment to OC, the operational creditor, then the COC will ask RP to invite resolution plan of others. So that is one condition which is there, that he has to pay. The promoter will have to pay the OC in full if he wants to succeed at the level of base resolution plan only. Now see, here I am trying to tell you something which is different, which probably may not be there in normal thinking, that base resolution plan says that we have to pay OC in full if we want to successfully get it approved. But this does not mean that you cannot succeed even after not paying OC. So please hear me cautiously. If base resolution plan is paying OC in full, there is no need for publication and calling invitation from public to come and bid for the company. But suppose you are not paying OC, the promoter is not paying the operational creditor. What will happen? What will happen is very important. They will invite resolution plan from the public. Now let's say there is one resolution plan A which has come. There is a base resolution plan by you, B. So A and B will be competing with each other. But suppose the person who is giving a resolution plan from the public, his plan is also not paying the complete OC, then COC will have to decide the best plan according to them. So there could be a situation that nobody is paying operational creditor, or maybe not paying the operational creditor in full under pre-pack insolvency also. So there is a dynamic bidding. Base resolution plan becomes the base. New resolution plan will come. Bidding will happen. Now, when a new resolution plan comes from the public, in response to the publication done, what will happen? In response to the publication done, if new plans are coming, it will be compared with the base resolution plan on working by tick size. So let's say there is a tick size of 5 rupees, 100 rupees is the base plan. So the another plan would be of 105. Only then it will get successful vis-a-vis base resolution plan. If suppose the promoter increases his bidding from 105 to 120, again the outsider will have to increase it by a tick size of 5, 125. Only then he would succeed. He will not succeed at 121, 122, 123. So this is the basic concept of base resolution plan and the concept called tick size. So I'm not going into hyper technical calculations, but very simply, there is a tick size by which a third party plan will succeed vis-a-vis promoter's base resolution plan or updated resolution plan. So this will have to be done on a dynamic basis, and though the law says 48 hours, we are yet to witness how this will happen. But yes, 48 hours is the timeline which has been given in the regulations by which it should get okayed by the appropriate authority of the financial creditor. So they will have to be really quick to achieve these 48 hours timeline. Then what would be the mandatory things in the resolution plan? So if you see the resolution plan, these are the mandatory things in the resolution plan. Though my friends who all are insolvency professionals would be aware about these mandatory contents of the resolution plan, but just for the sake of reiterating, he has to first check the 29A. So obviously the defaulter person should not be permitted. So that is something which is a declaration which has to be taken on affidavit. So that's a practice not written in the law. We should always do it. Then we should see how the person who is going to buy the company is actually going to revive the business of the company. It should not be a case where the person is doing something else and he's going to say that I am going to revive the company and I just want to buy the company. So there has to be some plan on how he is going to implement, how he is going to supervise, how he is going to revive the business. Yes, there could be a situation where he is buying a textile company and he himself is doing a chemical business. There could be a difference of business. There could be a change of object clause in the article of association. That all can be done in the resolution plan. In fact, merger can also be proposed under resolution plan. Demerger can also be proposed in the resolution plan. These all ways of merger, demerger, amalgamation, all these things can be there. Even we are aware that there is a stock exchange for SMEs. So it could be that delisting provisions have also been included in the resolution plan. So all those things, reduction of share capital, not paying to somebody, restructuring of the capital, restructuring of the debt getting converted into equity, all those provisions which are normally there in the resolution plan, all these things can also be there in the resolution plan of pre-pack. There is no differentiation. Therefore, it can be there here also. Now I'm coming on to something which is very special in this particular pre-pack, vesting of management of CD. So normally under pre-pack, what happens is under pre-pack, insolvency will continue with promoters in possession. We call it debtors in possession, not creditors in possession. So debtors in possession will continue. So board of director will continue to do work. But if sometime it happens that there is a recommendation from COC by at least 66% that the management should not continue, then it will get vested in the resolution professional. So what I am doing is I am saying that board of directors should not be permitted to exercise their powers. So in a way, we are trying to introduce CIRP provisions. Then 54J allows vesting of management of CD by instance of, obviously with a majority of 66%, to take it to the resolution professional. Here, RP will have to make an application if before NCLT if the COC says so. If it happens that the corporate debtors management is done in a very wrong way, in a very mismanagement way, whereby it comes to the conclusion, the COC and the RP obviously will come to a conclusion that it should not continue with the promoters, then also it can be vested with the RP. Though an application will have to be made to the NCLT. And NCLT will obviously by an order transfer the management to the resolution professional. Now here there is a tricky thing also. If NCLT is of the opinion, then also this vesting of management of CD can happen to the RP. So basically they are saying that nobody can misuse this pre-pack insolvency process. Now the penal provision, and which I always say they are very important, because if we are aware about the good provision, we should also be aware about the negative or the penal provisions, because this is going to be a very tricky situation where the company itself is going for asking, please give me oxygen, I want to revive. So adjudicating authority or NCLT has the power to impose penalty up to 1 crore rupees. So probably that's the highest amount of default for which MSME can come. So there could be a situation where a cost is imposed on the corporate debtor if insolvency is done with an intent to defraud somebody or done with a fraud or malicious intention. So if this intention comes on to the table, comes before the NCLT, probably the insolvency will go aside, pre-pack insolvency will be set aside, and the penalty can be imposed on the corporate debtor itself. Though I don't understand that how this cost would be recovered, because if the promoters themselves have come to NCLT for a meager amount or a maximum amount of 1 crore and giving a penalty of 1 crore, how would it survive? I don't know whether by imposing penalty, again insolvency would commence or not. So that's going to be a very challenging question. Another issue could be if during this insolvency process of pre-pack, any corporate debtors officer, director, anybody is trying to manage the affairs in a way to siphon off the money, to defraud the creditors, then again 1 lakh to 1 crore could be imposed. So these two provisions have been introduced in addition to other provisions which are already there under IB code. Now comes the concept of termination of pre-pack by NCLT. So adjudicating authority would be NCLT. So I am using the word NCLT. No resolution plan is approved within 90 days. So 90 days I am talking about insolvency commencement date. Then if the COC rejects that there is no resolution plan, so we are not going to approve anything. NCLT rejects the resolution plan. Maybe it is not in accordance with law. COC resolves to terminate the pre-pack, then also it will go for termination. Or COC resolves that I should terminate pre-pack and initiate CIRP. So this is very important. There could be a very tricky situation, company planning to go under pre-pack, but the FCs learn something and they say that no, this company should be forced to CIRP, and this pre-pack is a sham transaction, so then company can be thrown directly under CIRP, and the law says it will be assumed to be initiated by financial creditors under Section 7. So normal Section 7 will be presumed if pre-pack gets terminated by COC with the consent of 66%. Now the question comes whether COC can resolve for liquidation. Answer is no. COC cannot resolve for liquidation. They can only resolve either to terminate pre-pack or to initiate CIRP. Now, if the management was vested with the RP, so therefore it means that the board of directors were doing something fraudulent. In that case, if COC approves any plan where there is no change in management and the existing management is continued, then also this pre-pack insolvency can be terminated. Meaning thereby, the law thinks about pre-pack insolvency as a measure to resolve the company. It does not mean that it can be abused. When COC is aware that they were trying to defraud, when the management was transferred to RP, then why did the COC approve a plan where the management was the same? Therefore, in that particular specific situation, even when the resolution plan has been approved, it could be terminated by NCLT. So there could be three situations for liquidation. If NCLT is satisfied that COC approved plan is not in accordance with law, where NCLT ordered for vesting of management with resolution professional, even then COC approved a plan of the existing management, and where the plan which was approved has not been adhered to by the management or contravened by the management. In that particular situation, insolvency may turn into liquidation. Now, though I have already explained you, to take it under CIRP, it will be assumed to be a Section 7 insolvency at the instance of financial creditors. But again, the view has to be 66% majority will have to take a view to take it under CIRP. NCLT will have to be intimated, obviously by RP, by filing an appropriate application. NCLT will order termination of pre-pack, appointment of RP, not IRP, RP under CIRP by asking the existing RP to give a consent, or they can send it to IBBI for appointment of somebody else. Whatever cost has been incurred under pre-pack will be considered to be a cost under CIRP. This complete cost will be assumed to be cost of CIRP by court order. So I think we have completed well on time. So we have some 10 minutes for queries. So if somebody wants to ask any query, the house is open. Rachitji, are you able to see any query? Then we can answer those queries.
I think they are most related to PPT. So PPT will be available, and I think it will be made by our team. So I think we don't have some more questions.
Okay. So if there are no queries, then my details are there on the PPT. If you have any queries, I would be happy to answer all of them. And I think, Rachitji, then we can close down the session if there are no queries.
Yes, yes. So thank you so much, sir, for taking out time and being here today. Thanks for sharing your profound knowledge and practical experience with us. I, on behalf of Taxman, thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for a patient hearing. Thank you, Taxman, for calling me. Thank you everyone. Have a good day.